tape is going to get pretty deep. So the controversial truth about narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy. So as you already know, if you have been in the mix, I do have 5 degrees. I did graduate from the top school in the country on sociology, behavioral science. I'm very experienced in this. I started studying it at 12 years old, and that's a long story of how I got into that at 12. I've done, a few anthropological studies, interviewed different people with the disorder, and dealt with it within interpersonal situations as well. What I have to say has absolutely nothing to do with academia part. So I don't hate them, okay? I don't hate them. Compassion is not the right word, but one of the common things I hear from people with this disorder is that they don't know who they are. They don't have the ability to love themselves. They're basically on a path of self-destruction, going nowhere fast type of a thing. And yes, some of them are no longer with us. And that is heavy stuff. And so you already know about the part as far as, how it forms. So basically it starts off with the mother. The child gets stunted somewhere in childhood. They don't develop a sense of identity. They take on the traits and mirror from others and things like that. Okay, we know about that. I'm not going to get into the academia part. What it really is, demonic spirit or presence, there's so many different ways that you could put it. When you have had a lot of supernatural things happen, like such as being able to have a conversation with one, and 10 years later, there's a completely different person who also has the disorder, and they can pick up the conversation you had with the other person, and they start speaking in the same voice and using the same cadence. People often describe that there's some type of telepathy or indescribable bond that they feel with each other, that it's like they can read each other's minds, that there's something about them that feels so familiar, and I'm here to tell you it is. It is a familiar spirit, and it is a familiar spirit. It is. I said, I often hear from these people, they don't know who they are, they don't know how to love themselves. It's heartbreaking. Some of them have even gone as far as telling me that, never to trust them ever, because they know basically what they're capable of. Okay, and I'm talking about narcissistic personality disorder on the psychopathic scale. I'm not talking about narcissistic sociopaths. Narcissistic sociopaths are very dangerous. I try to avoid that. I have dealt with a few of them, but it's like they'll hurt you and they don't want to. It's like they can't help themselves. They can't hold themselves back. They have to commit sometimes extreme acts of violence. Most people in prison are sociopaths. They have to do this in order to basically validate their own identity, to validate their own existence, because they feel weak. And it's very like they go through a lot of extreme feelings of guilt, self-loathing, etc. And they're more dangerous, in my opinion, like physically, as far as to be around them. If you start working with them and they can't handle it, can be very disastrous and chaotic. They do things that are horrible, okay? Things that are tragic, things that are, a lot of people who've dealt with them will probably say it like they have nothing good to say, but they'll never feel sorry. They can't say anything good about them. They will never feel sorry for them. Oh, that person's going to deserve what they get. Well, I get that. I understand, but there are other dimensions to this whole thing, and you're dealing with people who are, you need to go watch the movie Nefarious if you are spiritual, but at the same time, some of them are extremely talented, creative, intelligent. Their mental agility, enjoy their intelligence. I enjoy the potential that a lot of them have, but at the same time, there's so usually almost all of them choose a path of fear. They basically destroy a lot of stuff in their path, and including self-destruction. Almost all of them that I've dealt with have serious substance abuse issues. They've ended up really doing a lot of harm to themselves. Some of them are no longer with us because of their behavior as well. I've never seen one actually get healed, but what I have seen is usually when they get much, much older, I'm talking about like 60, somewhere in there, they become a lot more passive. It's almost like they kind of start reverting more to a childhood state. And they are easier to deal with, but that's a long time. I don't have it's not like a sympathy, or it's just more of like, it's a messed up situation all around. But yes, there are spiritual components of it for sure. I've dealt with some of them where I was able to tell them everything that was going to happen to them. I'm like, dude, you've got a choice to make. There's 2 paths. You go down this path, this is going to happen, that path, that's going to happen, and everything happened to a T. And I'm like, why did they choose the path of fear? Why did they choose the path that is not of free will? It's the path that's the opposite of that. That's what they chose, and it's almost like a self-loathing, again, element to it. But there are layers to that, layers to the whole thing. A lot of narcissistic psychopaths that I've met are also heavily involved in the occult. Heavily. That's a big thing. Very common. Witches, warlocks, you name it. Kind of goes back to what I was saying about familiar spirits. So how do you know if you're dealing with one? So if they put you in a state of anxiety, if they put you in a state of judgment, like you feel like you're being evaluated by them, because you're being triangulated by them. They typically deal in threes. They typically have at least 2 to 3 partners at the same time, and they basically put them in competition with each other. They actually follow pretty much almost textbook the same characteristics, same forms of behavior. That's just a part of what it is, a part of what they do. But my hypothesis thus far, that when they are younger, they get the demonic spirit that basically comes around them. And if you're not spiritual, if you're not into all that stuff, that's fine. Like, it's not, if you haven't had like supernatural things or, that's fine. But I mean, it happens, especially if you're approaching it scientifically, it still happens. When you're hands-on, yeah. Watch the movie Nefarious. I think that really illustrates it well, where you have the psychologist that comes to interview the criminal, and the criminal claims that he's actually a demon. And if you watch that movie, I mean, that movie is like, wow. I want to help them. I'm trying to figure out how, but the thing is, it's so easy for them to get off of track. They might be on the right set of behavior for a while and then just completely go off the rails. And there's like a short circuit switch where it's almost like they can't control it, but they choose not to. So there is that deciding factor of like, no, I'm going to do this anyways. At the same time, it's like, maybe repent. I don't want to sound like I'm like throwing the book at people, but like maybe like repent, opening themselves up to the supernatural, but on the other side. If I tell them, it's not your fault or something like that, that's not going to really do anything. And if you're dealing with someone that has this disorder, there's a man who right now, he's headed to the mental institution. He might be in it now because of dealing with a woman that had narcissistic personality disorder. She destroyed his life. And the story basically goes, when he met her and she met him, he has these quirky things that he's into, like comic books and action heroes and certain memes and certain movies and things like that. She loved all of it. She was exactly like him. She was like a mirror of him. And then she started attacking him for the same things that they had in common, the same things that she loved about him, the same things that he loved about her. And then she started running him through a series of behavior, and it was pretty identifiable right off the bat that, okay, this is narcissistic psychopathy, but he kept going back to her. The behavior that she had got worse. He ghosted him and immediately got in a relationship with somebody else, then comes back 2 weeks later and issues threats and forces him to give up certain things. And, within 8-9 months or something like that of him dealing with this situation, he now is by himself and says he doesn't know who he is anymore. He's lost all love for anything he ever enjoyed. He has no connection to anything. He has no connection to life. He feels like his life is a void, like a black hole, just is completely emotionless. And he's headed to an institution. His friends saw it. He had other friends that were helping him, but he didn't listen. Once you get past the initial love bombing stage, it's never going to go back to that ever. It's never going to be as good as that again ever. So that might give you some type of comfort. After the love bombing stage is over, that's it. There's no going back to that. You may get a snippet of that and that's it. They're going to drain the life force out of you. They're going to take away all of your joy, take away all of your happiness, leave you in a state to where you don't even know who you are anymore. Kind of like them. They're going to knock you off of any type of spiritual path. If you have a connection with, God and things that you love and things that you enjoy, you're no longer going to have this. So if you want that relationship, just know you're basically trading your life for it. You're going to be living in fear. You're going to be living in anxiety. You're going to be in a constant state where you're always worried. Is this the day of the discard? What are they doing? And they always up the trauma. Always up the trauma. They never stop. There's no bottom. So if the first trauma is they cheated on you, okay, next time they're going to cheat on you with someone close to you. Okay, if that doesn't do it, then they'll find the things that you love. They already know it. But it could be if your family is everything, if you have a child that you're taking care of and that's everything, they're going to somehow get the child taken away from you. If you have a little business it doesn't matter. Male, female, whatever. Like, just don't go with them. And how do you know? Pray. Ask, if this isn't good for me, allow it not to happen. You'll be fine. But when you're dealing with people who are working with supernatural things, and I think if I didn't add this earlier, that guy who dealt with that woman, she was a witch, a full-blown practicing witch, and more than that. Okay. all bad. And, he had so much charisma and so many good things about him, but because of her, it's like he has to start. It's going to be rough, probably. All right.